welcome to this edition of Harp Toolbox. So tell me about what skill is your tool going to help our harpists acquire, and why is this skill very important for us?
We're going to look at sight reading for harp, and it is really important because sight reading gives you the freedom to open a piece of music and get a good feeling for it, play a pretty reasonable version of it before you actually decide, do I want to settle down and actually learn this? Sight reading also gives you the skill to pick up music and play it with other people just for fun, even if it's just one hand or the other. So it's a really valuable tool for us.
So tell us about this sight reading book collection that you have.
Okay, these were written in 2006 onwards, over about 4 years. It's 640 examples of sight reading, and honestly, I never wanted to see sight reading again at the end of it. I co-wrote these with a fabulous harp teacher, Lisa Williamson, and we would write from our separate circles and then come together and see what each of us had written. We used the Trinity College Royal Schools and Australian Music Examinations Board exam criteria to look at the skills needed at each level and then work out how we were going to incorporate them in the sight reading. So we've got 4 books. Book 1 with the fawn cover, and that's approximately, well, it's not approximately, it's Absolute Beginner, and I'll show you how Absolute Beginner is really beginner, and that goes up to approximately grade 2 level, over 240 exercises, I think, in that book. So that's 2 hands together, still only, your smallest note is a crotchet. I think it's only up to 2 flats or 2 sharps. Each of the books has a guide in the front of it to tell you what you'll be working on at each chapter. So it goes over which time signatures, key signatures, and some of the skills, the performance direction, and any other special features that you might find in the pieces. So it's gently progressive, and so that's book 1. Book 2 is the purple cover, and that's grade 3 to 5. And then we've got 2 book 3s, one for pedal harp and one for lever harp, and they're the same pieces in each book. So you just choose one or the other. And the pedal harp pieces have been written especially for pedal harp, and the lever harp pieces have been rearranged. So they're the same pieces, but we tackle them differently depending on which instrument we're on. And some of them, we've had to change the order of some of the pieces in the lever and pedal harp books, because it turned out that when we were rewriting them for the opposite instrument, we found that some of them were harder when you had to play it on a lever harp than they were on the pedal harp, because you had more lever changes, or some were easier because you could preset a lever as a sharp in one octave and a natural in another octave, whereas on the pedal harp you needed to change the pedal in between. So it was a really interesting writing exercise to look at how things differ between the 2 instruments when you're trying to write them at the same grade. So yeah, the end of book 3 looks, just going to leave a harp one. Looks pretty crazy. It's lots of dots and sticks on the page. So yeah, gently progressive sight reading books that will definitely improve your skills.
And from a harp learner perspective, what do we have to do to prepare ourselves for sight reading and get started on these books?
So even at the very, very beginner level, right up to the end of the book, you follow the same process. You look at the time signature, you look at the key signature. If you're doing an exam, it's a little bit different from doing day-to-day practice on sight reading, because I always say to my students in an exam, the last thing you do is change your levers, because you only get 30 seconds to look at a sight reading example in an exam, and you don't want to spend that 30 seconds changing your levers. And often the examiner is not a harpist, we've found here in New Zealand, and so they don't necessarily understand that you've got to reset your levers to move between pieces. So you look at the time signature, you look at the key signature, you look for any tricky parts. Now, looking through a piece of music, I'll just go back to one of the easier books, you can easily spot things that are going to be like little signposts. So at the start of this piece here, you can see a couple of little small scale passages. So I wouldn't read note for note there. I would go, right, I need to put my third finger on this note, then I need to put my third finger on that next note. So you cut down the amount of information you need to the basics. We don't read something and go, I'm going to play a C, a D, and an E. You look at it and go, I'm going to play 3 notes for going up from C. And that's the sort of information you want to distill down to. You look for patterns of scales, triads, repeated notes, things that are an octave apart, and you just acknowledge them. And the idea of sight reading is that when you start sight reading that example, you want to keep the rhythm going, you want to keep the flow going, and you want to get as accurate picture of the piece of music as possible with one playing. So that's sort of like the official practice of sight reading. When you actually bring this into practice with a piece of music, you want to be able to hear that music, that book that you've opened up, you want to get a good idea of what it sounds like. And generally, music book that you're sight reading isn't as controlled as this. We have 8 bars for that one. We have 8 bars for that one. You know, it's very, very controlled. Your piece of music might have 32 or 64 bars or 100 and whatever, and mightn't fall into the same beautiful perimeters as is in the book. But at least you've learnt the skills on how to cope with chunks of sight reading.
And where can we purchase these books?
So these are available online at the Harp Music, hang on, what do I call it? The harpmusiconline.weebly, and that's got a lot of my music there. It's got these books, and they're also available at Melody's Folk Harp Shop, Fleur de Lire in Canada. So you've got them online in Canada. Yeah,
awesome.
Because having everything as PDFs these days is amazing. So I can send you a link list of all those ones.
That would be great. I will include that in the video description. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much too.